Alright, hello everyone, this is Mr. Crozier, and I wanted to give you some help on the quiz coming up. This is our practice quiz for 3.1 to 3.3. I'm going to do some of this, I'm not going to do all of it. There is an answer key posted. Alright, well the main thing about this quiz is that you're going to have to use the difference quotient on the front problems, on the first four. Then when you get to the back side, you can use your derivative rules. So just make sure you do the right work here. It says use the difference quotient to find the derivative of this. So what is f prime of x? What is its derivative? What is the slope at each point? Well, we know what we do, right? We take this, we plug in x plus h, and then we minus 3x squared plus 3 all over h, and we take the limit as h goes to 0, and you do the work and everything works out and you're able to find the derivative. Now we already know the rules here, but we do need to practice this. So we do know the rules here, so we know what the answer is, right? The answer is just going to be 6x, because you multiply this down and then you subtract, so the answer is 6x. So make sure this comes out to be 6x. Number 2, same thing, use the difference quotient to find the slope at this point. So we're doing it at this point, so what do we need to plug in? Well, first we plug in 3 plus a little bit more minus 1/3, and put that over h, and again you're finding the limit as h goes to 0. My first step would be to multiply both the numerator and denominator by the greatest common denominator here, which would be a 3 plus an h and then another 3. There's lots of ways you can show this work, but that's how I do this here. And I multiply it, and when you multiply these would divide out, and I'd be left with a 3, and then these would be divide out, and I'd be left with a 3 plus an h, and at the bottom I might write it 3 and an h and a 3 plus h, but there's multiple ways to do that. Alright, number 3, use the difference quotient again. So you're going to start it as x plus h squared plus 3 minus x squared plus 3. Do that, take the limit as h goes to 0, you have your answer. We know what the answer is, right? What is the derivative here? The derivative is 2, because you multiply this down and subtract 1, so it's just 2x. And now you can use that to find all these slopes. Well, what's the slope at 3? Well, it's 2 times 3 is 6. What's the slope at 2/3? Well, that's 4/3. What's the slope here? Well, that's -4. So once you find this derivative, you can find the slope at points. Just like down here, we could have found the derivative first and just multiplied by 3, plug in 3. Alright, down here, use the difference quotient twice. One from the left, and from the left we'd be using this equation, and from the right we'd be using this equation, and use that difference quotient, the same type of work right there. And what you'll find is the slope from the left side and right side at this point. So if we're looking at point 2, whoops, it's not a 2 there. If we're looking at point 2 on the x-axis, the slopes are not the same. They're different slopes here. Alright, so then when you get to the back, you're allowed to use your derivative rules, which we just multiply this down and subtract 1. So it's a lot easier. We don't have to go through dealing with the limit as h goes to 0. We can just go through and do everything. So you want to do the same thing here, here, and here. What's the derivative of just a number? Well, if y is equal to 8, well, that would be, wouldn't it be that line right there? Y is equal to 8, and what's the slope of that line? Well, the slope of that line is 0. So if you have a constant, the slope is always 0. How does that work? Well, that works like this. That's 8x to the 0 power. And if I multiply that down, I'm left with nothing. Just be careful of the fractions here. Make sure you do your work, but you have a fraction, and use a negative. Alright, number 6. So we have g of x. Find the equation of the line tangent at this point right here. Well, let's find the derivative. What is the derivative of this? Well, that's 8x plus 7. So if I find the derivative at 1, that means I'm plugging in 1 there, I have 15. So that means the slope of this line is 15x plus b. That's the slope. Now, plug in this point here for the x and y, figure out your b value. Alright, and the last three problems are all the same. We're finding horizontal tangents. That means if we have a graph, and it goes up and it goes down, and it looks something like this. The horizontal tangents are at these 2 points right here, where the line is exactly horizontal, and that's right at the maximum and the minimum, and that means the slope's 0. So we got to figure out when is the slope 0. Well, let's find the slope. Well, dy dx is our notation for the derivative, and if I multiply this down, that's negative 2x. Multiply that 1 down is 4. Constants are 0. There's a derivative. Sometimes, a lot of times, we'll write f of x and f prime of x. They mean the same thing. We can write y and dy dx. These are all different ways to write the same thing. So this is the derivative. So when is the derivative 0? Because the derivative is a slope. When is the 0? Solve that equation. Well, that's an algebra 1 equation. And right there. At this point, negative 2, there's a tangent line like this. So if the graph is here, I know that at negative 2, I don't know where, up or down, I don't know where, let's just say it's up, there's this line and it may go like that, and there's this point here where there's this horizontal tangent line. And we know it's a parabola, and we know it's an upside down parabola, so that's probably a good graph. Find the values where this one has horizontal tangents. Well, let's find the derivative. What is that? Negative 3x squared plus 6x. Aren't you thankful we have the rules now? We don't have to plug in the difference quotient, but we could, right? I mean, we could definitely do all of that. Whoops, this needs to be an h right here, right? We could definitely do all of this, but we don't have to because we know these rules. Now we just solve this equation. Solve that equation algebraically, you'll have your 2 answers. And the bottom one, let's find this derivative. Let's see here, if I multiply this 3 down, I have 3x, but it's divided by 3, so I have 3x divided by 3, that's just x, x squared. And if I multiply this 2 down, I have 2x over 2, so that's just x, and minus 6, and there's my derivative. So here is the equation to solve, and you got to solve it. How are you going to solve that? Well, it'll probably factor very nicely for you. Alright, well, I hope this helps you with your quiz. If you have any other questions, please email.